Hello!
Hello! Hi everyone! Welcome to the Gold Coast Art School YouTube channel, and today we are going to be drawing eyes. Now Dad is a bit of a pro. He's got...
Not true.
He's got 50 plus years experience. I haven't got that much, so it's sort of more like master and novice. So...
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Let's do it. Okay.
Alright, let's do it. Let's go.
Alright, so usually when people draw eyes, they do something like that. To me, that's like, alright, that looks like an eye, but that's sort of like a left brain kind of eye. That's like a symbolic eye. And we sort of assume, yeah, they go up, go down, and they're pointing at the end, like a leaf. But in actual fact, if I was to do a proper diagram, it would be more like that. Because the highest point of the lid is not in the centre, it's off to the middle slightly, and the lowest point is not in the middle either.
Yeah.
As a general rule, that's what you need to do.
Okay, so I should probably start...
Yep, corner of the eye, it rises up fairly slightly. Now, we're using 2B pencils, so they can be pretty heavy and nasty if you go too heavy. So just do lightly for a start, and then curve off gently till it's about level with the middle.
So it does go to about the middle like that?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Try and do it in one line if you can. Now there's a little bit of a corner thing here because there's a muscle there, but it sort of drops very gently and then gets about halfway and then curves up. You see, so it's sort of like, it is the reverse of what's happening up top, but as we get older, sometimes the way muscles work, that's increased.
So it goes up and then it goes a little bit.
It just
like
curves
that.
straight up into there because this one drops over the top. And you've got a lid, a bottom lid, and you've got creases there too.
Okay.
You can put them in if you like. So there's always that little bit there. Now, let's position our iris and pupil. I couldn't even remember what's the difference.
Yeah.
You're a pupil. Little iris.
Yeah, okay, so the iris is the coloured bit and then the pupil is the dot in the middle. Okay.
Now, also what often people do is they stick it right in the middle like that. That's also just symbolic. You ever seen an eyeball?
Yeah, I remember having to dissect things in high school.
Right.
Not great.
As a general rule, you'll find that the top lid covers the top of that eye. You don't see the whole lot. When you do, it means it's one of those, oh my God. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to try and draw like what you're up to now, which is this iris bit.
Yeah, really lightly. I probably use way too many lines. Everybody has their own way of drawing. It's the same as handwriting, but I tend to use lots of lines and then rub out the ones I don't want.
Okay.
So that's why I suggest to draw light for a start. Don't go heavy.
I have, is that supposed to touch the bottom bit?
Look at my eye.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay, alright.
Unless you sort of...
I feel like my eye shape is wrong. Like mine feels like mine's a lot bigger than...
Oh!
I've got mine too rounded on top.
Yes!
Okay, I'm going to rub this out.
Good. Rises quickly, steeply.
Yeah.
And then starts to curve.
Goes
and
down.
it drops away.
Is that too...
That's better.
Okay, it's better, but it's still not there.
Well, think about the overall proportions of the eye. It's a fairly elegant line, isn't it? Can you see that?
I'm not very elegant.
You're not elegant?
I think I am.
So that's sort of what we call the linear structure. That's kind of like the foundation of the eye. So the next step is to think about 3 dimensions, and how is that indicated? It's the way light plays on a subject. So let's think about the form of the eye and how it's affected by other stuff. Now, there's the brow bone, they're set back from the nose and set back from the brow bone, and the sun's coming in that way, so there's always going to be a little bit of shadow cast across the eye. So just to get yourself started, I reckon what we need to do is just gently shade in a tiny little bit. Now, no detail, because we're just starting to just get a little bit of form here. At the moment, there's no detail in the eyes or the eyeball. Now remember also it is a ball, so it'll be very faintly shaded into the corners too, but hardly any, just a little bit. Alright, now we're going to work on that some more as we build up on it. From above, that's what eyelashes look like. They're like they're like a veranda and a porch, and they just cover up. They block off the light, so you get this soft light play across that. Now that's going to affect the colour of and the tone of your eye. Everything is going to be slightly darker over the top. Now let's just establish where our
pupil
is going to go. So just lightly draw that in. And it's kind of like about 1/3 of the volume sort of thing, isn't it? Like it's about the same. So that's just to establish where it might be. Why do we need to do that? Is because it doesn't matter what colour the eye is, all this section underneath here, can you see that? That's going to be roughly, that's going to have the main colour of the eye. Everything else is going to be shaded. So it doesn't matter if you're a brown-eyed person or very, very dark black eyes, you'll still see there'll be a little bit of a slightly honey gold colour on the bottom half of the eye, not on the top. While we're at it, let's just establish where our lid's going to go to. We need to know
I think
that.
I probably need to change this because I changed my eye shapes earlier.
Yeah, they tend to. Now they can vary with age too. As we get old and baggy like me, my eyelid disappears under a collapsed muscle, but we'll talk about that much later.
And is that more rounded, or does that also
It pretty
follow
much follows. When you're young, it follows the same. Don't you put on eye paint?
Not so much these days. Can't be bothered.
I've seen you on YouTube with eye paint.
I used to like fully paint my face up.
How to zhoosh yourself up for a party on a Friday night.
These days I don't do that so much. No.
It does. Okay, now we're going to start thinking about eyelashes. Remember these things that are covering, that's giving us a shadow? Let's establish those. Now, most people go and do this kind of thing with an eyelash because they think they all spark out like
it's like a sun icon or something like that.
A sun icon.
Like
I was thinking more like a porcupine fish.
Oh yeah, like a puffer fish.
That's the ones. Yeah. And that's true to a point. But because when you consider what's happening, it's a curved surface that has a curved fringe. See, there's a curve that way and a curve that. That's the eyelid. The eyeball's hiding in here somewhere. And so this fringe, are quite often the outer ones, the ones on the outside are slightly shorter anyway. They tend to get longer in the middle, but not always.
All right, so where do they go?
All right, so when you look at this is where you're looking at them. See how they're straight to a point. As you see past that straight, that middle point, that means that, yes, they're going to be like this. Now, they sort of curve down and then they curve back up again. Or they go straight out from the lid and then they lift up. So they don't just go straight up like Betty Boop, you know. So what happens is that just makes this whole shadowed area a little bit more complex because there's actually sometimes that intrudes on that. So you're, just to diagrammatically do it, it's like this straight, 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 and then it starts to curve away. As it gets past your direct line of vision, you then start to get that curve. Can you see that? And that can be exaggerated with mascara. And they're not dead straight. They start fat and they get skinny. You knew that, didn't you?
Yeah.
And just draw them in lightly because we're going to go in heavy later because they look darker and thicker closer to the eye itself. As they reach out, hit the light, doesn't matter if you've got mascara on, they're still going to get paler at the ends because they're catching the light. The light bounces off them as well. If they're really long lashes, they do. Now, I've got mine really spaced like crazy. Some people are lucky to have double eyelashes. My brother, Max, has got lots of eyelashes. At the moment, mine's starting to look like it's got way too much in the lash zone. But that's what rubbers are for. How you going?
I think I'm going okay. This kind of about right.
Yeah. Now, they look a bit skinny at the moment, don't they? So what happens is when closer to the eye, it's more like a double line. See that? They actually, see how they're fatter close to the eye? You might like to use the side of your pencil for that. It's a 2B, and so That's kind of one of the reasons I sharpen them with a knife, so that you've got lots of lead to play with. Oh, another thing, folks, just because the paper's like that and you're looking at it like that doesn't mean to say you have to draw it like that. It's often awkward to do those lines. Turn the paper around if it's easier for you to follow the natural arc of your hand, your wrist, and just turn the paper and make it easy on yourself. If you're comfortable when you're drawing, you're going to be more accurate. Now we're not going to spend a lot of time. Bottom lash, guess what? They don't come off the bottom of the eye like that. There's a tiny
That's
little...
what I was going to ask, like a waterline?
There is a ridge of skin which goes like this. And it's important to draw that in, because that, believe it or not, when we start doing our tonal work, that catches the light. And I notice when you're painting a portrait, always run a little line under that. It's not, sometimes it's a wet line. It is wet because it's being lubricated from inside. Same as that little corner, that muscle corner, that corner in the corner of your eye, that little muscle there, that has a highlight on it too. Now, bottom lashes, not so extreme. Again, start in the middle, straight down. They grow out from under that, so there's a tiny little line there. I should show one that I've prepared earlier. That's what I normally do.
You cheat.
I cheat. People ask me, how come you're so good at art? And I say, I cheat. And they don't realise that I'm actually not being funny, I'm being truthful. Most painters and drawers, they get to where they get by finding natural shortcuts and ways to get the best effect with the minimum of effort. It's not because they're lazy, it's because it's called efficiency.
I feel like mine are fake lashes, like the individual lashes that you can buy and just pop on.
Now, question. We're going to have to apply some tone to this eye to make it look right. Where are we going to put it? What's got tone?
Well, the iris, like the coloured part.
Boom, boom. Okay. So let's just lightly colour that in slightly. Watch what I'm doing.
Okay.
I'm just giving that a little bit of density, not a lot. All right, just for a start. What's going to happen if these lashes are sticking out and blocking off the light?
Well, they'll probably cast a bit of a shadow or something.
Shadow on a flat surface or a curved surface?
Curved.
Right. Because why?
Because it's a ball.
It's an eyeball. It's just like, I'll tell you later, it's like a mirror. All right, so what you do is we just lightly, just for fun, kind of lightly put them in, very, very, very lightly. And of course, when you hit the whites of the eyes, which aren't particularly white, it tends to not show up because the pigmentation of the eye itself doesn't show it up. Now I'm going to go round and round and round, because mine aren't particularly dark eyes. You find that once you've got those little bits of a sort of suggestion of a reflection of your eye, we can go darker later, but you can shade back in over that. And because it's pencil, it just layers and layers and layers. Cool. Now, don't forget that the eyeball itself isn't really dead white. It is very, very pale grey. That's useful if you're going to put your person in an area where there's more than one light source, because you get highlights and stuff. So we're not ready for highlights just yet. Now we're going to do the black bit in the middle.
Okay.
Eyeballs are they're mirrors. So what I like to do, is just a cheap trick, but it's kind of fun, is I like to draw a picture of myself in the eyeball. So here I go. I'm going to draw there's my head, and there's my shoulders. Now I'm using the side of the pencil.
So how come, because the pupil is black, but you're putting a black figure inside of...
Yep.
Okay. So, but that makes sense?
It might.
Oh, so it needs to be quite dark.
Yes, it's silhouetted.
Okay.
I silhouette myself in somebody's eyeballs. And I leave a bit of that behind. That doesn't have to be all that bright. But I always do it lightly because I'm going to have to wipe back to get the highlight. Now we can start building up the tone. And I'm just indicating roughly there's a little bit of the scribble in here, because eyes have that random kind of little veins flowing in. They're not really veins. I'll have to ask an eye doctor
We know
about
one of
that.
them.
We do. No doubt he'll watch this and he'll make a comment.
Maybe.
As he's not at all busy, being an eye surgeon on the Gold Coast, he has nothing to do. I'm sure he'll have time to look at this. So, and as a general rule, around the outside of the pupil, it's slightly darker before it hits the white bit. You notice that? So you can sort of add a little bit.
Uh-oh, somebody's calling us and I can't pick up the phone. Ah, no. So when you're applying the tone, you're holding your pencil a certain way, like
I was holding it at an oblique angle because this is for doing sharp line work, really super detailed. This isn't that kind of drawing. And if you use it so, you can get nice shades, and you can just put extra pressure if you want to give that texture of the eye, because there is patterning in the eye.
That's what I wondered as well, if there were lines that come out of, like the iris has...
Oh, absolutely. There's a whole pattern. That's what I was talking about with the... people can read that. They sort of... There's loops and little pockets of open colour and veins like that. Does that make sense?
That's what I was wondering,
you can use a random style, but head towards the middle. Don't go across the edge there. You'll find that once you've added that tone, then you might have to add a little bit more accentuation with the shadow at the top that the lashes form and things like that.
Yeah. I think that I put my bottom lashes were coming out of the wrong area, so it was meant to come out of the bottom.
While you were away, I just ran my thing there just to as a little bit of a highlight on that bottom.
Okay.
It's up to you, whatever's comfortable. You got to be comfortable.
So
that's good. All right. So then, now all you have to do is just accentuate just below that point where the beginning of that little eyelash starts, because they come out from there.
Okay.
Don't they? They're little triangles. They're fatter at the other thing I noticed is that this is a muscle, so you can round that off too.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And if you've coloured it in too much, if it's too tonal, then just go in there and nick a little bit out. Put in a highlight. We're almost at the time to do highlights, but I think because we're doing a tonal rendering of a generic eye, it's probably not a bad idea to not forget our eyelid. Now, if the light's coming in under the brow, this section of the lid is going to be lighter, so you need to just darken that up, and then as it comes out, the lid's like that, that's catching light. And so you can just shade into the corner a little bit more and then shade above that so that the lid's a bit more obvious. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then the same thing with below here. You can be quite loose with it. It's just to establish that it's not an isolated shape floating in midair all by itself. Right, so you've got a light dusting of shading everywhere. Probably that goes around a bit there too, just a tad as it disappears into the head. Get a putty rubber and you'll find a nice area there. And you can, if you feel that any area has got too much light, like that thing, or too much shading, you can always accentuate that. If perhaps you think you'd like to put more tonal information, like in the eyeball itself, you can just lift some of that out just by going dab, dab, dab. See how that kind of gives the impression of the textures and the shapes within the eye. And then often you have to shade that back a bit to establish that as a really super highlight. And it just means everything else is going to be darker than that highlight, because that highlight is the lightest part in the whole painting. Not the eyeball so much. But the eyeball, the whites of the eyes are definitely lighter, but they don't have to be pure white.
Ah, so you meant like pull back on...
I reckon in that, I just go 3/4. And often there's a secondary one there, just a very slight one off to one side.
I feel like I've just totally warped the shape of my eye.
Oh no! I love 2B pencils because you can sneak up on, you can just reduce the light without going too dark. And then what I'm doing, because this is textured paper, if you're working on reflex, you don't get that problem. But sometimes you have to go in a little bit harder because this has got quite a bit of stipple.
Okay.
What do you reckon?
Well, I think that I learned how to do it properly. I'd be interested to know if you can write a comment below and tell us what was your key takeaway from this, because for me, yeah, for me, I think it was the reflections, especially with the eyelash reflections. I didn't even think about that beforehand, but it makes total sense, really.
Yes.
It's very logical. So,
check yourself out in the bathroom mirror.
yeah. So that was my key takeaway.
Oh, cool.
So let us know what you reckon down in the comments below. Yeah, you can even let us know what you would like to learn next, because we were thinking different facial things. So like this is the eyes, so what about the nose, the mouth, that sort of thing. Thanks, Dad. That was
You're
fun.
welcome.
Yay.